How would you react if I told you that some clubs who currently play in Serie A have had golden periods in their history? Yes, we all know the legacy of Juve, Inter, Milan and Napoli, but we shouldn't forget the past glory of smaller clubs. So let's make a 10-minute throwback to the 6 most iconic underdog stories in Serie A history, starting from the most famous and finishing with the most surprising one. So stay till the end, because number 5 is wild. 6. Sampdoria, 1986 to 1992. Sampdoria once stood among the most romantic stories in Serie A Genoa club formed in 1946 through a merger that rose to challenge Italy's giants in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Their golden era came under the management of Yugoslav coach Vujadin Boškov and was characterized by the iconic goal twins Gianluca Vialli and Roberto Mancini. After seasons of building momentum, Sampdoria clinched their first ever Serie A title in 1991, turning heads with their combination of flair, grit and attacking punch allied to disciplined defence. The following year, they reached the European Cup final, narrowly losing 1-0 to Barcelona at Wembley after extra time, a testament to how far they'd come. In fact, they'd previously suffered another major European defeat at the hands of Barcelona in the 1989 Cup Winners' Cup, losing 2-0. So, Barcelona could be really described as their biggest European nightmare, as strange as that may sound for a team with such limited European success. But hey, even little is more than nothing, right? Ultimately, let's not forget that they won the Cup Winners' Cup the following year in 1990 by beating Anderlecht. Apart from their Serie A triumph and European near misses, they also won all 4 of their Coppa Italias in that period: 1985, 88, 89 and 1994. You could really say that during the late 80s and early 90s, Samp was the real deal in Italy. But what do you know about them now? You probably know that they were relegated a couple of years ago and are now in their 3rd season in Serie B. But few of you will know that they nearly lost their 2nd-tier status last season, only surviving after a playoff match against Salernitana. But I'm sure only a few of you know that Sampdoria are currently experiencing the worst period in their history. After 4 rounds in 2025-26, they sit 20th with 0 points won, and are the bookmakers' favourite to get relegated to Serie A, which will potentially happen for the first time in their history. Parma, 1990s. Do you know what unites these following names? Gianfranco Zola, Risto Stoichkov, Lilian Thuram, Hernan Crespo, Fabio Cannavaro and Gianluigi Buffon. Well, apart from, obviously, being incredibly talented footballers, they all played for Parma. Not just at any point in their careers, but during the club's most successful period, the so-called Golden Period. It stretched from the early 90s all the way up to the start of the 2000s. After Arrigo Sacchi laid the groundwork in the mid-80s, you know, the guy who spoke the famous phrase, "Football is the most important of the least important things in life," and casually won the European Cup twice with AC Milan, Parma became a real force during the 90s. Backed by the dairy and food corporation Parmalat, they won major honours, including the Coppa Italia in 1992, the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1992-93, and the UEFA Cup in 1994-95 and 1998-99, as well as the European Super Cup, the Supercoppa Italiana, and multiple domestic cup trophies. Their best league finish came in 1996-97 when they were runners-up in Serie A. However, the decline followed swiftly after the rise. Around 2003-04, Parmalat collapsed amid a major financial scandal and the club was placed into administration. Around a decade later, in 2015, the club was legally declared bankrupt and had to be refounded as Parma Calcio 1913, starting again from Serie D, the 4th tier in Italian football. Cagliari, 1960s and 1970s. Cagliari's golden era spanned the late 1960s and early 1970s, a period which still defines the club's identity today. Before then, Cagliari was relatively obscure. Founded in 1920 and bouncing between the lower leagues, the club was often overshadowed by the giants of the Italian mainland. However, everything changed when Gigi Riva arrived in 1963. With him in attack and a resolute defence led by players such as Enrico Albertozzi and Pierluigi Serra, Cagliari rapidly became serious contenders. In 1969-70, they achieved something extraordinary by winning their only Serie A title and becoming the first club from south of Rome to win the Scudetto. Only Napoli have managed to do that with their 4 Serie A trophies, but Cagliari's achievement is still impressive. That season is famous not only for the trophy, but also for how dominant Cagliari were. They conceded only 11 goals in 30 matches, a defensive record almost unheard of in Europe. Riva was the league's top scorer with 21 goals. After that success, they enjoyed several strong seasons, participated in European competitions, and established a reputation for exceeding expectations. For instance, in the 1993-94 UEFA Cup, Cagliari made it to the semi-finals before being knocked out by Internazionale, further proof that their ambition and potential were real. Oh, and let's not forget one more tiny but important detail about Cagliari. This is the team that bore the talent to one of the finest midfielders in the world right now, and surely Italy's best, Niccolò Barella, Palermo, mainly 2000s. The case with Palermo is interesting because technically their most successful period was in the 2000s. However, during the 2010s, they had the most renowned players in their entire history. Like Cagliari, Palermo has always been the island team that nobody knows anything about. They're basically the yo-yo team that spent more or less equal time in each of the 3 levels of Italian football. However, everything changed with the arrival of Maurizio Zamparini as owner in 2002. To be precise, their last sustained top-flight stint before 2004 ended in the early 1970s. But in 2004, Palermo finally returned to Serie A after 31 years, powered by Luca Toni's goals and growing ambition. The following season, they shocked the league by finishing 6th, securing a UEFA Cup spot in their first season back. If we were to compare this to something from recent history, it would be the Spanish team Verona in the 2023-24 season, who finished 3rd 2 years after promotion. They consistently finished in the top 6 in both the 2005 and 6 and 2006 and 7 seasons, beating big clubs at home and threatening to break into the elite. Players such as Javier Pastore, Cavani, Barzagli, Sirigu and Fabio Grosso became household names, bringing attacking flair, creativity and a real identity to Palermo. The pinnacle came in the 2009-10 season when Palermo finished 5th in Serie A, just 2 points away from qualifying for the Champions League. They also reached the Coppa Italia final in 2011, losing 3-1 to Inter, who were the current treble winners at the time. Chievo, Verona, 2000s. We have Chievo, whose story is truly inspiring. This is not only because they no longer exist, but also because of the extent of their success compared to their previous performances. They never had any iconic players or renowned managers, but the Flying Donkeys were one of the most likeable teams in Serie A history, which probably comes from their nickname. Chievo's fairy tale began in the late 1990s and early 2000s. A club from a small Verona suburb representing a tiny community compared to Italy's footballing giants. Chievo long played in the amateur and lower divisions. In 2001, under the leadership of coach Luigi Del Neri, they secured promotion to Serie A for the first time in the club's history. Remarkable not only for the promotion itself, but also how quickly Chievo adapted. In their debut Serie A season, 2001 and 2, they finished 5th and qualified for the UEFA Cup. That's what I call an overnight success. And do you know the story behind their nickname, the Flying Donkeys? The fans of the main town team, Hellas Verona, jeered that Chievo would only reach Serie A when donkeys could fly. And, well, Chievo proved them wrong. Yes, they never won a major trophy or played in a final, but what this tiny local team with only a handful of fans achieved in such a short time was truly huge. However, after years of barely meeting the minimum financial requirements of Serie A, they were unfortunately excluded from professional football in 2021. Hellas Verona. Verona is best known for Romeo and Juliet, but the rivalry between Chievo and Hellas Verona is also memorable. Unfortunately for Chievo, Hellas have always been the bigger team. They have more history, more glory and more scars. What's their proudest moment? Winning the Scudetto in 1984-85. Coached by Osvaldo Bagnoli, Verona stunned the elite of Serie A. While giants like Juventus, Roma and Inter received all the hype, and AC Milan were just waking up shortly before Silvio Berlusconi changed the whole game in Italian football, Verona quietly built a fortress of defence and clever tactics. They drew 13 games, losing only 2. That title remains the only one in their history, but what a statement it was. Before and after that peak, the club was no stranger to promotions, relegations and yo-yoing between Serie A and B. They returned to Serie A in 1968 and stayed mostly steady until the early 90s. But after the sparkle of 85, the struggles set in. Financial constraints, losing key players, the inability to keep pace with Italy's large clubs. Hellas never sank into oblivion, but they never again reached those heights. Meanwhile, Chievo emerged later, charming and cheeky, but Hellas had already painted the big picture. Verona's golden era is wrapped in legends, upsets, and that one season when the outsiders weren't outsiders, they were champions. So, this was our list of the most iconic underdog stories in Serie A history. And if you have any other teams you'd like to add to our list, please contribute in the comment section down below. You're absolutely welcome to do so, so be our guest. And also, don't forget to push that subscribe button, help us climb the ladder of success, and of course, I'll see you next time.